says, quarter or half of a seat because of overly large people on the other side. She did suggest that they swap seats, and apparently there were siblings, these two larger individuals, and the gentleman didn't want to do that, so she was in the middle of those. Apparently it was a full flight, she couldn't move. If you've saved up all year for your trip and that's what you get, you can't move for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, is that fair? Should the larger people buy 2 seats? On the other hand, the two larger people, they've saved up all year as well. There's nothing to say that they can't go on holiday and what have you. And I'm sure they would have felt awful in that situation. They would have been very embarrassed. I mean, there's another TikToker who blogs about how embarrassing it is and what she does when she travels as well, and gets a lot of support from a lot of people in her situation. So my question to you is, should obese people buy 2 seats when they want to fly, or do you think the woman who's complaining about this, somebody Watson or other, should just shut up and be kinder to her fellow passengers? Well, it caused such a debate that we thought, well, we will have a debate. So on one side, we've got Phil Dave, who's a producer, and on the other side we have Lindsay McGlone, who describes herself as the fierce fat feminist. Let me start with you, Lindsay. Thank you so much for joining me. What do you think about this? It's a tough one, isn't it? Or is it?
Well, it is, because in fairness, there were 3 people in a situation where all 3 individuals felt uncomfortable on a certain level. And I think for myself, it'd be easy for me to come on here and, play up to that rhetoric. Well, fat people are entitled to sit where they want to sit and sit how they want to. And they are. But what this situation shows is there are things on all parts where people dealt with this how they shouldn't have dealt with it, and left themselves and others wide open to discrimination, to feeling uncomfortable, and for threats to happen where both parties are in a vulnerable position. So actually it is a difficult one, but we need to think how we're broaching that situation rather than it being wrong and right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but do you think that in this case that those 2 bigger people should buy, if they were siblings and there's I'm guessing 3 seats together, should you have to buy, or should you be required to buy an extra seat?
I think that comes down to the individual themselves. If they feel that they need or require an extra seat, that is their prerogative, their right to choose whether they want one or not. It's not a case of having to, needing to, or wants to. It's a case of, if that's financially viable. We talk about accessibility. Is it financially accessible for that person to buy another seat to accommodate for their size? Are those people travelling for a particular reason? Are they travelling for leisure, or are they travelling for something that they need, example, an operation, or to support their partner? It should never be the case of, well, you are this certain size, so you have to. I understand that, different denominators mean that you need a bigger seat, therefore you make that decision yourself. You should not be told.
All right, so Phil, how do you feel about that? Do you think that in this particular situation, I mean, how would you be squished in between, in this situation? Do you think that obese people in this case, or any case like this, should have to buy an extra seat?
Okay, well, I think the first thing to say is that obviously there are many contributing factors as to why someone may be obese. And it's really important to remember that this is not attacking anybody who has an issue, maybe a medical condition, or is on medication that causes them to be morbidly obese. So it's super important to clarify that before we get into this. I'm talking specifically about someone who does not know how to control their diet and chooses not to control their diet, okay? So that's really important to me to clarify just before I say what I'm about to say. I think that the person I feel most sorry for in this situation is, without a shadow of a doubt, the person who was caught in the middle of those 2 seats. I'm just using this as an actual example because the way I look at it is that Absolutely. She did save to go on holiday wherever she was going, and she was perfectly entitled to be in comfort that she bought when she chose to go on that aircraft. And I don't see why the life decisions, assuming it's life decisions, of the two who are sitting either side of her should mean that she has to be in discomfort for the duration of a flight. I personally think it's very unfair. And yes, I do believe that if someone chooses to live a lifestyle that means they are going to be morbidly obese, why shouldn't they pay more when they are potentially taking up more resource? And that goes for anything, really, from aircrafts to clothing, theatre, anything. I don't see why not.
So you think obese people should pay more for clothing as well?
I don't see why not. If that's the case, why should I, as someone who potentially takes a certain size, which is of medium build, I'm not going to pretend that I'm super slim or anything, but of medium build, why should I pay that, say, for example, the same as someone who maybe buys something that's extra large? You wouldn't do that in a restaurant. If you bought different size meals, the smaller the meal, the less you pay. Why not the same for clothing?
Lindsay, your thoughts on that?
Well, the expectation and the narrative of somebody that my size is that we're thick and we don't have an understanding of our body and what that may mean in the future. But in regards to paying more, I have an understanding that let's go with I need more material, I need more space, but I'm paying more taxes every time I put a chocolate bar in my mouth. Every time I order extra off the menu, I am paying more taxes. I work in healthcare myself. Why should I have to pay more taxes? If somebody uses the prison service, are they charged more for using prison services? Are they charged more tax? No. Everybody's lifestyle decisions have an implement and an impact on the things that they need from society. I pay my taxes. I pay that money. I am not going to pay more for things that everybody is entitled to, and I will not be cut off of them just because I am fat.
But would you not...
Coming back...
Sorry, Trisha.
Go on, Phil.
I was just going to say, but if it boils down to lifestyle choice, and Lindsay, please understand that this, I don't know you any more than you know me. This is by no means an attack on you. But my point being is I don't understand why it is fair that someone who potentially uses less resource, whether that be, in a theatre seat, which is maybe designed for, look, I agree, most theatres are sort of quite ancient now, and as a result of it, they were obviously designed for when the people around were much smaller, and that includes me. I can't always say I'm comfortable in theatre seats now, but the point is that it boils down to that I don't understand sort of why it is fair that if someone has chosen to live a lifestyle which means that they take up more resource, why they shouldn't pay for that resource. And you say through taxes, that's all well and good, but that doesn't cover the cost of additional material in clothing.
No, but just like a smoker, for example, we change and alter our lifestyle to accommodate smokers. So we put smoking bins outside venues. We allow for smoking areas for people to practice that unhealthy, quote unquote, life choice. Why can, if we're talking about theatres, which is very passionate to me as I come from a theatre background and produce shows myself, why can we not make the effort to accommodate and make our venues and our spaces accessible for larger people? We talk about one of the tweets that was a response was fatness isn't why practice that fatness is normal when it isn't, but why ridicule and degrade people into losing weight? It doesn't work. If we made world kinder and safer for people who are larger, then therefore they may feel the confidence and ability into themselves. If they so wish to lose weight, then they would. Why do we have to ridicule?
So Lindsay, do you think? So, Lindsay, are you saying that, coming back to this original woman, do you think that there should be seats maybe that are larger, that costs a little bit more, but as you can for leg room? Because I know on many airlines, if you want to have certain seats where there's extra leg room, you can pay a supplement and get those seats. So would it be fairer to have, Phil, maybe you can answer this. Do you think it would be fairer, just as you can choose those seats and pay a little more to have more leg room, that if you are larger, you can pay a little more and have a bigger seat on the plane?
Well, I think there'll be plenty of people who say I'm wrong about this. And look, I understand, Lindsay, for the record, I completely and understand what you're saying, but my only concern with that argument about maybe making theatres more accessible to those who do require a larger seat is that then openly encouraging people to live a more unhealthier lifestyle? And I worry it is. I don't think for a second, by the way, that individuals are solely to blame here. I personally blame the manufacturers of certain treats or what have you that just happen to have the monopoly on supermarket shelves, for example. Every time one goes to the checkout, what do you see? You don't see healthy snacks, you see chocolate bars as soon as you go through the checkout. I think that contributes enormously to it, and it's absolutely abhorrent that that is allowed to happen. So I don't entirely blame
Phil,
individuals.
all right, so let me bring it back to, like I said, let's bring it back to this plane idea. If you pay extra for extra leg room, do you think you should be able to have, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 seats on the plane, or where you can pay a little bit more and the seats are wider? Would that solve the problem, Lindsay, in this particular case?
I think if that's an option and that is financially accessible and viable to the individual, and please don't come at me saying they can afford to buy numerous amounts of food. If that is accessible to them, then they can then access that. And I think that would be a brilliant choice and option for somebody like myself. Do I feel that I'd opt into that? Absolutely, because I am aware of my size and I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. I might be ballsy and loud, but it doesn't mean that I want to inflict my fatness on other people. So yes, if that was an option, I would absolutely, personally for myself, I would save and I would buy that option, yes.
And Phil, do you think that would be a good idea, or or do you think you'd still end up? I can't see airlines doing that, but I don't understand why they can't if they can't do it for legroom.
Yeah, well, look, I think that when it comes to the quantity of anything, the larger the quantity, the more the price goes up. That's typically sort of what we expect as consumers. And that is my biggest argument when it comes to the amount of, say, material required for larger clothing. That's the reason why I believe that the larger the item of clothing, the more that should be charged for it. I don't see why not. In exactly the same way that if an aircraft is going to have to lose 1 or 2 seats in order to accommodate wider seats for those who perhaps would require it and indeed want that to be the case, absolutely I don't see why it shouldn't be the case. Otherwise, where's the incentive? The truth is, and by the way, can I pick up on something that Lindsay, you said earlier on, where you say that sort of the depiction of someone who is of a larger size is that they're thick. I don't think that at all. I have always been an absolute champion that people should live the life whatever way they want to. But I'm also a great believer is that it shouldn't impact the life of someone else. And that's exactly what we've witnessed with this example of this aircraft, where 2 individuals who, for whatever reason, are larger. And I stress this again, I very much hope it's by lifestyle choice and not because they've been inflicted with something that they can't control. Why should it be that the person who isn't in that situation should be caught between the 2 individuals who have chosen to be in that situation, and therefore they're in discomfort, but the people potentially either side are not? I don't think it's very fair. That's
But
all.
it's also interesting that she did say that she asked if, because they were siblings, that if they wanted to sit next to each other. Clearly they made the decision not to. Is that where they went wrong, Lindsay? Do you think that they sitting next to each other, they would probably have been less comfortable, but they should have done that and let her sit on the aisle seat, for instance?
I think it depends what angle we're going at. Are we going at let's ridicule fat people, or are we going at a personal, let's have a conversation? This person in between us, they are uncomfortable.
Comfort-wise.
So if we're doing it for comfort, then if that conversation was open, frank and valid and not discriminated online, which the person then went on to do, I think if I was in that situation, I probably would have said, okay, if that's going to make you more comfortable, I will sit next to the person I'm with. If we are 2 larger people, I understand that. But there has to be a level of understanding that those individuals who were larger may have felt uncomfortable too. Now, I am not righting or wrong in that. I am saying that all 3 individuals in that situation needed to have an open and frank conversation. If they were together,
but
they could have sat
is it
together.
not difficult, though? Is it not difficult? And I hear what you're saying, Lindsay, and in an ideal world, that's exactly what should happen. But I'm thinking in a real world, I'm guessing it would have been embarrassment all round. notwithstanding, and I agree with you, when you start getting on Twitter and spreading it and making jokes about it, it goes into different territory. But with that, if we took that away from it, how easy or how difficult will it? I mean, I'm thinking of many of us who've been in a similar situation. You don't. How do you bring that up? I mean, how do you say anything without causing a fight? Dave, would you be, if you were there, would you have been able to do as Lindsay said, which I have to say is the ideal way to deal with it, but in real life, ooh. I mean,
no, in a million years.
Would you be able to say
absolutely. In a million years, of course, I wouldn't do it. And it would be for exactly the same reason. I'm going to be brutally honest. I am super uncomfortable having this conversation. I know it's an important discussion, which is why I was happy to take part in it. But it's a very uncomfortable discussion because I feel that sort of having my views, which I don't believe to be unreasonable, can be misconstrued as being fattest. And I promise you, I'm not. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm more than happy for anyone to live their lifestyle the way they choose. But it's when it starts affecting others, that's when I start having a problem with it. And that is why I say that, so for example, this person who is stuck in the middle, absolutely, of course they shouldn't take to Twitter and start lambasting people just for being large. If indeed that's what they did. Of course they shouldn't do that. Nasty. But what I would say is that it is unfair that the person who is in the middle of this, quite literally in the middle, is literally the person who did not necessarily choose to live a lifestyle that affects others. And that's what my problem is with this. And that's why I think it's unfair.
So Lindsay, coming back to you, I mean, you are one of those people who are wonderfully open and very upfront about this and enable us to have discussions like this. But I'd say you're probably a rarity.
I think, okay, it's very obvious with the quotation.
A wonderful rarity.
The fierce fat feminist. You're going to ask me questions. You're going to approach me. I get that. That's okay. And just like like yourself, I'm leaving myself wide open too. You're saying that people will come and say that you are, you're practicing fat phobia, you're fattest. Do you not feel as the marginalised person in this conversation that I'm having a conversation where I'm leaving myself wide open too? So you might find it uncomfortable, but I find it glorious and brilliant because we're having these conversations, just like myself.
I find it uncomfortable, Lindsay, for no other reason than I just don't want to cause offence. That is not my intention at all, but I think it's a legitimate conversation to have.
But in regards to going back to having that question with somebody in the real life, in that situation, example, an aeroplane or something, I think if you go about that situation in such a way that you enter it with kindness and you say, things like, I'm not trying to be, rude or anything, but you actually deliver it in a kind way, not say, I'm not meaning to be rude, but... And you have that conversation. If we built a society where those conversations were more readily available, then therefore we would be able to practice it. So it all goes round in a big circle. Somebody politely said to me that I was infringing on their space. I would try my very, very best, what was in my capability, to make that space more comfortable for them. But if that conversation hasn't happened, or a hint like, do you want to sit together? I'm sorry, we're not mind readers.
No, but I don't think it's about being a mind reader. But I suspect, though, Lindsay, that you, as Trisha said, are quite rare in the sense that you are open to this. But you can't deny that there would be an awful lot of people, and I'm talking about people I'm even related to, who would be hideously offended if you brought this up as a topic. It's a highly sensitive topic that people, more often than not, don't want to actually address and don't want to talk about it because it hurts them.
Absolutely.
Well, that's one of the reasons that we absolutely wanted to do this. I mean, the very, very lazy journalistic word for this is cancel culture. It's a very, very lazy word. It's misapplied in many times. But I'm a firm believer, unless we get things out in the open and we have discussions like this where no one's insulting. So please, if you're thinking of ringing in or tweeting something nasty or phoning in something nasty, please lead from this conversation and address your remarks in a similar manner to both of you taking part. Thank you very much, Phil, Dave, and thank you very much, Lindsay, as well. And that's a question we're asking you, what do you think? Is Phil right? Or has Lindsay got a point? Or do you agree with both? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about it. It's the question of the day. Should an obese person in that situation pay for 2 seats? What would you do in that situation? Have you ever been in that situation? Do get in touch with us, 03444991,000, or you can text the word